Yes, there are just a few points I'd like to respond to. I think that Islamic reform is a knowledge project of which Islamic feminism is one aspect of it, because for there to be reformism in my mind, you must actually interrogate the sacred sources and the presumptions that stem from them and the systems that have been developed from those presumptions as they have been understood. I distinguish this from what I call liberal Islam or liberal Islamic methodology, which is located in our present and don't see a trajectory from Islamic primary sources to certain, I think, ideas that we may have an agreement about freedom, about democracy, about equal participation and equal rights before the law. But to be reform methodology, it has to do a similar project that Islamic feminism is doing, which is to interrogate the entire system structurally throughout. So I want to make that recognition that Islamic feminism is a part of reform methodology, obviously not all of it. And I want to say some things in particular with regard to queer Muslims and this methodology. Once you open up and recognize that our intellectual tradition is open continually to interpretation and challenge, and even the methods whereby we consider ourselves applying our sacred sources, once you open up that possibility in very specific ways, then you have the foundational basis for establishing new fiqh, and in particular been talking with people about new fiqh of sexuality, because the sexuality as encoded in medieval fiqh and reinvigorated after the end of colonialism is a sexuality without equal agency of any partner. In fact, the man is the full agent and the woman is simply a receptacle. I have a little story. I think I'll tell it anyway. It's hard to tell stories when you're doing translation, but somebody was talking about the Hanafi fiqh around the 10th, 12th century, and a woman was actually considered only to be the vagina and therefore have no agency. And so if a mature woman, an adult woman, seduced a child who is a legal minor, or an insane person who is also a legal minor, if she seduced him, no one would be charged with zina, because zina can only, which is the crime of either adultery or fornication, because zina can only occur with the agency, obviously, of the man. So even an adult woman seducing a child was not an agent, so there would be no zina, because the child and the insane person would not be guilty because they're not legally culpable. So this mentality where you don't have sexuality of reciprocity or consensual impacts on our ability to even discuss the matter of same-sex relationships, because actually there isn't mutual consensus, there isn't the consensual, and even the story of LATTE and all that, how that goes, it's minus an intellectualization of an understanding of consensus. My interest in it was always because there is no idea of marital rape in Islamic law, because once she signs the contract, she doesn't have any right to assert consent or absence of consent. So we need a new fiqh of sexuality, not just because of queer Muslims, but also because of some of the problems encoded in the heterosexual normativity. So when you open up the reinterrogation, the notion that, you know, we're the people, we're the Muslims, that we get to be able to think about what is Islam, then you also have the chance to be able to think much more coherently, given our current realities, about some of the underlying presumptions of sexuality that have been encoded for centuries. And that brings me to the last point that I want to make, which is, well, actually, I do want to make one other point, which is something about how this reformist methodology, including Islamic feminism, how this methodology becomes a part of civil society under the rubric of the democratic nation state. And I don't want to give another lecture, so I have to say this as succinctly as possible, or refer you, as has been my inspiration, to ABDALLAH an-Naim's work on Islam and the secular state, where he distinguishes between the location of the believer as a citizen and the prioritization of anybody's interpretation of religion as the rule of law of the state. Surely, all persons are influenced by their belief systems. So, no, a Muslim would never participate in civil society or democracy without also bringing their full person, their belief in God, however it may be. But the difference is that no laws can be codified except by the will of the people, meaning all people have a chance to argue against even what your belief is if you want to put your belief into law to be forced by the state. So many people in many contexts, when they start hearing about secular, they think it means you can't believe and also participate in democracy. Believe all you want, but the concluding laws cannot be based on yours or anybody else's interpretation of religion or of Islam or your love of God, which I surely have, as the conclusion of the discourse about civil society and the laws under which they will operate. So I do recommend you read his work. I may have botched it up a little bit, but the return from this, with regard to things like the Arab Spring and the Islamist parties and its relationship to Islamic feminism, the return for this is actually reinterrogating the notion of active people participation in democracy. And democracy is not something out there that when you say it, it's going to be perfect or fixed, but actually democracy is about a process or a procedure whereby you actually do take the will of the people, including people who are believers. So it's taking away the authority that is often arbitrarily given to one person, one perspective, one gender, one sexuality, as having the authority to then adjudicate for everybody within the context of the actual democratic procedure. So it is possible then to see the dynamism of both our civil societies and our beliefs. They can still be in dynamic relationship. I'm not sure about some of what I heard about the Islamists. I think I missed some points in translation or something, but what do I want to say about this? Try to keep it short. The idea that the Islamists are themselves also static, I think we need to get off of in the West. There have been changes from within, and there will continue to be changes, and I think we need to remember that maybe something started off very, very far on the right and has shifted itself a little bit more towards the center, and stop assuming that just because you put the title Islamist, that it's always going to be one and the same thing, and that it's always going to be irreconcilable with, say, democracy. So I just kind of want to drop that in there. Yeah, see what we're saying there? Okay, great. Yeah, he didn't translate everything. I kind of missed it, so...
Donc, premièrement, sur la question d'un féminisme islamique, on peut considérer que, d'une part, il se distingue d'un féminisme libéral en ce qu'il s'ancre dans le passé des sources sacrées, et d'autre part, on peut considérer qu'il fait partie d'une logique, d'une méthodologie plus large de réforme, et que donc c'est juste un des éléments dans un programme plus vaste. Deuxième point qui concernait le lien avec les questions de sexualité, il ne s'agit pas seulement des questions queer, même s'il s'agit aussi des questions queer, puisqu'il s'agit plus généralement de droits en matière de sexualité, et avec deux exemples qui ont été donnés. D'une part, des discussions au XIIe, XIIIe siècle autour du fait que, puisque les femmes n'étaient que vagin et que donc elles n'avaient pas d'agency, si une femme séduisait un enfant ou un fou, eh bien, on ne pouvait pas considérer qu'il y avait adultère ou fornication. De même, n'existait pas le viol conjugal, puisque la question de l'agency de la femme n'était pas en cause. Sur l'influence de cette méthodologie réformiste sur la société civile dans les sociétés démocratiques, ça demanderait un long développement, mais un des éléments les plus importants, peut-être, en s'appuyant sur les travaux de quelqu'un dont je n'ai pas retenu le nom,
ABDALLAH and Naïm.
Voilà. Qui donc, entre autres, insistait sur le fait qu'il n'y avait pas de loi qui pouvait s'imposer sans la volonté des populations concernées. Je vais très vite, puisque en fait le lien peut se faire avec les printemps arabes, et cette question a remontré combien la participation active des populations était un élément qui définissait la démocratie. Dernière remarque qui était liée en partie au fait que ma traduction était trop télescopée de la remarque de Stéphanie, mais c'est sur le fait que les islamistes ne sont pas immuables, c'est un groupe politique qui change et qui en particulier peut se déplacer de la droite bien dure vers le centre.
Merci infiniment. Est-ce que vous avez des questions? Alors, d'abord, madame, monsieur, est-ce que quelqu'un peut prendre les tours? Le tour de chacun?
I have a question for you, Professor Wadud. First of all, thank you very much for a very interesting talk. I think a lot of us learnt a lot from you. I'd like to think, like you do, that Islamists may be shifting from the far right possibly towards some kind of center through some kind of democratic process. But I am aware that the Muslim feminism you preach is amazingly outrageous. In Afghanistan, where I've been working for the past 10 years, I can tell you from experience, having attempted to participate in a gender center, that an Afghan American who very much followed your teachings hoped to implement something of the kind, sort of thinking in your direction. And, and that was the most outrageous thing she could do, and it was extremely dangerous for her to do so. So where does one start, and how do you actually get things changed? Sure, there's the democratic process, which is a wonderful idea, etc., but practically, if in a university, in a Muslim country, well, perhaps Afghanistan is an extreme case, you can't even talk about anything approaching Muslim feminism without being seen as the worst of the worst. What do you do? Where do you go from there? Thank you.
Je traduis. La question portait sur le fait, un certain scepticisme par rapport à l'idée que l'islamisme se déplacerait de l'extrême droite vers le centre, et en particulier à partir de l'exemple de l'Afghanistan sur lequel vous travaillez, et la difficulté de faire entendre ces questions, et le danger extrême qu'il y a de faire entendre ces questions, c'est-à-dire comment on fait dans un contexte peut-être aussi extrême que celui-là.
Okay, first I want to thank you for your lecture. I'm here. It's a great pleasure to hear you and to have you there. I have just 3 short questions. The first one is, would you say that Islamic feminism is a means or a goal? And I ask this from a European perspective, because maybe in other contexts it's totally understandable that it's a mean to achieve a certain idea of female rights. But from here it can also be perceived as a goal in itself, which means it aims at creating and imposing an Islamic or even an Islamist version of female rights. So what do you think about this? Is it a means or is it a goal? My second question is the nature of arguments used there. If it's a reappropriation of the sacred texts, what is the reaction of the traditional Orthodox patriarchal ulemas? Because they also have sacred arguments. So finally, is it a good way to go forward in these questions? Because they can also say, okay, I have also sacred arguments. So how we get out of there? And are you optimistic in the idea that maybe one day the Islamic or the Muslim world can have another paradigm than the religious one? And my third question is, we talk about Islamic feminism as it's the same everywhere. I'm asking you, I'm Moroccan, and for example, in the context of Morocco, we have I was going to say our president, no, our king. Our king is also the leader of the religious believers. So the only context we can speak within is the religious one. So what do you think of that? Is there any way to go out from the religious context and to have another word, a sort of word which can be not religious? Thank you.
Très brièvement, je traduis les trois. La première, et vous me corrigez si je déforme, la première, c'est de savoir si le féminisme islamique est considéré ou doit être considéré comme un moyen ou comme une fin, puisque ici il est souvent perçu comme une fin qui reviendrait à imposer l'islamisme. Deuxièmement, s'il y a possibilité de réapproprier les sources sacrées, en fait c'est en confrontation avec d'autres qui font la même chose, qui prétendent parler au nom de ces sources sacrées, et donc comment réagissent ces oulémas et comment peut-on espérer, en gros, quel optimisme peut-on avoir par rapport à cela. Troisièmement, est-ce qu'on peut parler d'islamisme ou selon les contextes nationaux différents, et par exemple au Maroc où le roi est également chef religieux. Et donc il y a des différences importantes à mettre en lumière. Ça
va? I have two quick questions, and the first one is basically goes hand in hand with my thanking you for the very instructive approach that you give us to a certain number of concepts like Sharia, and a certain approach to Islam that I am really unfamiliar with, and that I would like you to share with us a little bit more, if possible, to the extent possible. And I mean, I don't know if it's appropriate to ask for that, but we were told in your short biography that you converted to Islam, and my question is, what Islam did you convert to, and what was that Islam that you embraced? And because I'm used to a form of Islam where something like Sharia is perceived as tradition, and there are such things as trials that are here for the Sharia and such things. So it's very interesting to see that you approach Sharia as something like as something that that is akin to the Tao or a divine project. And the second question has to do with with your desire to reconciliate Islam or spirituality and sexuality. Where the intuition I have of religion in general is that there is always this sense of, I mean, this will to normalize and define a norm, and say what is right and what is wrong, which is something that queer movements in general try to fight against. So I'm trying to see how those things can be reconciliated. Thank you.
Encore une autre question?
Je traduis très rapidement aussi. La première question était sur, puisque conversion il y a eu dans le parcours d'Amina Wadud, à quel islam s'est-elle convertie, et en particulier donc avec... vous soulignez que vous étiez intéressé par le fait que la vision de la charia qui était proposée aujourd'hui était très différente de celle qu'on a souvent. Et la deuxième question portait sur le lien que vous avez établi entre spiritualité et sexualité. Et la question qui est posée est celle du reproche qui est parfois fait aux religions pour leur caractère normatif et pour leur imposition de ce qui est bien et de ce qui est mal.
Okay. Next week, inshallah, I'll be going to Afghanistan. And it is not at all necessary for me to even use the word feminism. I have no attachment to that word. I'm interested instead in women's inclusive methodologies, practices, experiences. So just because I give a talk on Islamic feminism doesn't mean that I go to Afghanistan and start talking about Islamic feminism, and that if you don't hear this word, then you can't function in terms of the projects that I've been invited to participate in. So I don't know who it is that's supposed to be doing what it is that they think, because I have not published a single thing in where I identify myself as an Islamic feminist. So I don't know what they base it on. I have published substantially on things that have to do with gender-inclusive readings and why this is both necessary and good. And I would hope they would be inspired by that, because it applies to including women's voices and experiences no matter where they are in the Muslim world. So I think that I appreciate your advice, because I wasn't going to talk about Islamic feminism, but then
how extraordinary your attitude, you and Islamic feminism in general, in the Afghan context.
Yes.
Not you specifically or anything like that, or even worse, not even talking about feminism.
Right.
Decent attitude.
The conclusion that I came to, the reason why it became important for me to accept an invitation to Sydney, Australia, and write this paper about these three voices is because I really had never said anything identifying myself as an Islamic feminist. In fact, my last written comments were in rejection of the term feminism. So I had to really say what was my experience, literally what was I going through to come to the transition where I could accept to identify myself as an Islamic feminist. And it's because the discourse changed. And part of the change in the discourse was interrogating the location of feminism as anti-religious or Western, and relocating feminism as an epistemology and a methodology. So that is the reality that I lived, but I have no record of it. This article, I referred to an article I was reviewing before I spoke. This article I haven't edited yet to be published because I have family situation with my grandson, but it needs to go out there. But the conclusion, which I have already articulated elsewhere, is we need every methodology that we can get to work on certain issues in the context of Islam and Muslim societies. So working in concert with people who do not wish to use a religious methodology is not a problem for me. And working with people who consider themselves Islamists with a more patriarchal interpretation, but who establish schools or feeding programs for poor families is not a problem for me. So this discussion, to talk about these voices, is to say also something else, and which is at the end of the 20th century, at the beginning of the new millennium, we are seeing a movement, a mass movement among Muslim women that we have not seen similarly at any other time in Muslim history. So whether they be Islamist women or secular Muslim women, we are seeing a variegated mass of women who are taking agency with regard to these issues. And I'm happy to be a part of that, even if I have my biases, my limitations, and my preferences. That's fine. So I'm much more happy to say that in every country, in every community, rich and poor, no matter what country, women are working on women's issues in the context of Muslims, and everywhere they are working. They work in different ways because there are different constraints and different possibilities, but they are working. And anybody who believes that, oh, well, it doesn't happen in Saudi Arabia, which I still hear people say, they don't know what's really going on. Every community, you don't even need massive resources. A woman could be raped, like Mukhtar Mai. She could be raped, and as a consequence of that and a series of things that she put into place, she is now the founder of girls' schools where hundreds of girls are receiving education. So we are, I guess, easy to say, we are not victims waiting to be saved anymore by anybody. We are agents of our own change. And yes, we are diverse. And what we missed in Beijing in 1995 was the ability to accept that maybe we don't all approach the issue the same, but we are all approaching the issue. So I feel that what I would be sharing in Afghanistan is not Islamic feminism, but how women must continue to be a part of their own processes of change. That's a simple message, and I have theology and stuff that I will be sharing to go along with it. And I think I want to skip just for a second to your question, what kind of Islam did I convert to? I was very conservative. My husband was Tablighi Jamaat, and I wore niqab back in 1972 when I became Muslim in the city of Philadelphia. And I would have been really pissed off if I came to France and they told me I couldn't do it. The establishment of the necessity for thinking through the religion that I have chosen was a part of the continual process of my conversion. So I'm continually converting every day. What I convert to is Allah. I don't convert to all of these other intermediaries in between. So I don't even convert to myself because I'm not the same today as I was yesterday, and hopefully will not be the same tomorrow, or I'll be dead. The idea, I'm going to answer your other questions. The idea that you've never heard of, this idea of Sharia as the way, or the reconciliation between spirituality and sexuality, because there is a norm, and if you're not that norm, then you're wrong. This is the idea that we're often handed to prevent us from taking full agency. The idea, all of these ideas have existed in our tradition for a long time. If you read Ibn Arabi, you will come to one of the best articulations of the relationship between sexuality and spirituality, including non-normative heterosexuality. So I think everything has already been there, but we've been told that Islam comes down as one little notebook. If you don't get this notebook, then you don't have Islam. And you know what we do? We don't take the notebook, and we don't go behind it to check on all the books that are there. So it belongs to us. So it's open. Don't get chased off by the people who, when they chase you off, then they get to continually control what, you know, what house, and the notebook gets smaller when you run away. It gets smaller and smaller, you know. So just claim it, move it back, take it back, you know, all of the world, you know, belongs to Allah. So likewise, you know, it belongs it belongs to us. We have that access. As far as the specific situation in Morocco, I guess I was hoping that you would share with us that Morocco is one of the first Muslim majority countries that have instituted equality in Muslim family law under the Mudawwana, and was encouraged by the king. So I know that there are problems with everybody as a leader. But one of the goals that I have is working on equality in Muslim family, and I'm very pleased by the changes that have come about in Morocco in particular. I'm absolutely unclear, personally, what it means to speak outside of the paradigm of religion. I don't know what that means. I'm sorry. I'm just too religious to do that. The reason why I feel that I can do that is because I'm also very clear that that is my choice, and therefore it is not something I force on someone else. So I don't really know what it means to speak outside of the paradigm of religion. I don't. If you look at the Musawa, Musawa.org website, you will see that it is a dedicated conversation and agreement between human rights standards and Islam. In other words, they are not one or the other. So there is a convergence, and it converts in very specific ways, like the movement for CEDAW without reservations. Many Muslim countries have ratified or signatories of CEDAW, but they hold reservations over Article 14 and, ones that talk about equality in the family and stuff. And, there are women who are working on CEDAW without reservations are saying that you can't take some of it and leave part of it, what Musawa is organized around is the concert between these two discourses. As I said earlier, not human rights or Islam, but human rights and Islam, equality and Islam. And this concert between these two voices is very important because of the procedural thing I was talking about from ABDALLAH and Naim. In order to implement it into laws and also to raise consciousness to impact on society and on attitudes, you do have to be able to adjudicate. So you'll see this if you look at the website. If in your country is a signatory of CEDAW, but it practices a law that is in contradiction to it, one of the methods that you use in order to be able to achieve that equality is to hold it accountable before the international bodies when you have to do these country reports. We consider all that in line with the objective of equality in Islam. So methodologically, it is not either or. It's not like you have to have Islam or whatever. But the whole idea about not having either or is we are not giving up Islam to have this discourse on equality. We are not giving up equality to have this discourse on Islam. And that, as I tried to say, is what makes for a difference. And so therefore, all of these are our right. We have access to CEDAW. We have access to the Constitution. If in the Constitution it says equal citizenship, but there's a difference in the law because of something in the family law or the personal status, then we use the Constitution to challenge the way in which the family law is adjudicated. So it's a very embracive system that actually takes full citizenship rights, full agency, and Islam. And you don't have to leave them off. So I suggest you look at some of the details in which the things have been articulated in order to be able to appreciate that at this point in time, nobody can tell us that we have to choose. We can embrace it all. So this, inshallah, will help.
Thank you all. We are obliged to end this conference because it's time to close. And so thank you all for coming. Thank you very much, Amina, and thanks for the discussion and translator. Thank you very much.